We're going to resume our music store application. If you remember in the last video, we got up to page 57 in which we entered in all this code for the table. And really what we were doing is we were setting up a format into which the website would execute and you would end up seeing a screen like this. Now I'm coming back to this work about a week after the last video. It's about how long it's been. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch Visual Studio, and I'm going to run the application. And the next couple of pages of the tutorial are really kind of exploring the application and seeing how it works. So even if you've already done this, this is just kind of a little bit of a refresher, and it's also to make sure that the code that I'm opening up is working. So I've been working in Visual Studio 2012 for this. So I'm going ahead and opening up the solution. And I'm going to go ahead and launch the application. All right, now you can see the application has launched. The other thing that you should do is go ahead and just start clicking through here, and I'm clicking on the store. But do you guys remember the piece that we just built? What was the piece that we just built? Right. I mean, the part where I'm clicking through to like the albums and all that, that's something we already did. But what we were looking at, we had created a controller for store manager. And when you go to the store manager, it brings up the table like what you see in the book on page 58. And what this is really allowing us to do is that we created basically kind of a view and a bunch of actions that are going to allow us to manipulate the content on the website. So basically the interface, if you were to log in and be able to edit and delete and change things, this is what you would see. But notice, you don't create the login mechanism first. We're creating the thing that we need to log in to access first. And that way when we create the login mechanism, which is coming up down the road here a little bit, all the stuff that requires it will already be in place. That's the better way to develop. Okay? So you create the stuff that an authorized user would see before you create the authorization to enter. Because that way you're not really attaching it to anything. It's not that you couldn't create the authorization piece first. That this is just, I think, a better development approach. Build it first, then put the locks and keys on it. All right, now if you take a look at what's going on here, the code that we just most recently completed is allowing us to pull down all the different albums and all the categories and basically just creates a list of them. And if you go back and look at the code that we used to create this, it's not a whole lot of code, and that's really part of the power of what's going on here. That's part of the power of MVC, because we can write real short pieces of code that interact with the database and pull back a lot of information without writing a really, confusing looking SQL statement. And really SQL statement shouldn't confuse you, but this is a little bit more eloquent than using a SQL statement because we're using that object relational mapping where we're taking data structure, we're giving it object-oriented style names, which makes it really easy in an application to pull in large chunks of data with very little code and to manipulate it all at the same time. All right, the thing that we should do, and I guess we should follow the tutorial would be smart, right? So they show you here a listing kind of like what we have. Then they want you to click the edit link, and then you'll end up seeing something like this. So let's just go ahead and click edit on any one of these. And then you see this form that was created. Notice drop downs for different categories of music, the artists, text fields where you just enter stuff in. Obviously you have a field that accepts a numeric price, and then a relative URL for the image that the album would have. In this case, they are pointing to a placeholder. But if you were running a real store, you would have real images that would be attached. And then notice there's a Save button. Let's click it and see if anything apparently it works, right? The way to find out, of course, is to change some of the information. The other thing you can do is go ahead and click the Details tab, which just gives you that information without the ability to edit. It just puts it out there. I think the edit link is interesting in that we also have the form available to make the edits right there. This is really one of the power things of MVC, and the way that we generated this form was based on the fact that we had the data structure in place first. We had a data model built, not necessarily the database, but the data model. We had files that fed the data into the application so that when we would instantiate the objects of the database, it reads those files, it creates them, and allows us to manipulate them. And then the scaffolding feature looks at those things that are pre-created like that, those data structures, and then when we hit generate, it not only builds the data, but it builds the ability to manipulate all the data with CRUD operations in one fell swoop. And we did that when we were working with the scaffolding. That's what the scaffolding does. You have your data structure, database stuff, right? What do you do with database stuff? You create records, you retrieve records, you update them, and you delete or destroy them. And that's all scaffolding. Yeah, that's correct. That is correct. That you get into a very complicated area there. Yeah. Generally speaking, if you're selling somebody's product, I mean, if you're selling a name brand product, it's okay to use the name brand on your site. I mean, how are you going to sell, a can of Coca-Cola without saying Coca-Cola, here's what it looks like, right? And you are using it to make a profit, but the company that you're buying it from is also making a profit. There's a lot of little ramifications there. But generally speaking, as a reseller, you kind of automatically gain that right. Well, I'm not going to get into the details of that, but there's kind of like you guys have exclusions as students for copyright issues. Retailers have exclusions as well. So, I mean, like I said, how are you going to sell a can of Coca-Cola and provide an image of it, and not what are you going to? It's not like the Super Bowl where I can't say, "Let's go to the big game," right? Yeah, there are repositories. That's not really an issue of concern here, because retailers would be selling products probably by buying them from a distributor who also has the rights from the actual manufacturers and owners of the product to be able to do it. I mean, how else are you going to sell? So I would say that's not a concern, generally speaking. And the images that you would have working on a site like this would be of such low quality, it's not really an issue of like using it for reproduction, honestly. All right, let's jump back over to the book. And they have you basically testing all the different features of the view that we have. And the other thing that you should do is give that delete a try. So I'm just going to pick one here that I don't want in my record collection. I'm sure there's something in here. All right, this one looks like a good choice. And then you should come back here, and then you should also verify that it did indeed disappear, and it did. Okay, so we have all the CRUD operations are functional for Store Manager to be able to manipulate all the albums, their contents, and all the listings for all the data fields that are associated with it. Now, if that doesn't impress you with MVC, you might want to do a little bit more reading as to how much more challenging it is to build all those little components from scratch with a standard application. MVC gives us this acceleration, and it's powerful. All right. Bottom of page 61, they're taking us over to the Store Manager Controller. And so I'm going to go back to Visual Studio here. I'm going to hit my stop button, and then I'm going to bring up the Store Manager Controller so we can kind of examine the code and kind of follow along with what they're showing us. And take a look, once again, at all the different things that we have going on here. The one thing, just remember, is that we are actually using something that we built. We're using the class library. It's just a C# file, right? MVC Music Store Models. And that has within it all the database information for the application. That is what is allowing us to basically do this, where we are creating basically music store entities, and that is something that we define. This is not like a pre-built thing. We defined that. Then we're also naming it database, and then we're creating a new instance of it. Please keep in mind that as you're pulling up a page, it's instantiating a copy of the information in the database. Right? It doesn't pre-exist prior to that. We have the structure for it, but we don't have the database. Then from there on forward, we can use DB in place of all that, and then we just are basically digging through the structure of the database. So somewhere we have a thing called album. Somewhere we have a thing called artist. Notice genre, all that stuff. That's how we're bringing it in, is through the naming convention, because those are all data models. The other thing you should notice is music store entities. Music store entities. And then what's inside of here? Yeah, it's got a listing of all the stuff that we have listed here. So really the path that we get to these particular files, the reason we have the ability to use that syntax is because we first defined each one of these, then we grouped them together and gave them a definition inside of music store entities, and then when we come back to the Store Manager Controller and we decide to give it a name as we instantiate, we can then leverage any of those files through db.whatever, .genre, .artist, .whatever. And that's the ORM component. A lot easier than a SQL statement, especially if you're using a large amount of data that needs, basically replication in order to be visible. So, in other words, let's see here. I'm trying to get. All right, these are all the actions. One of them here, it's the index view. I don't know why I'm scrolling to the bottom. But the index view, with just these 2 lines of code here, is the whole list. I mean, this defines the approach for listing one album. We're not writing a list. The toList command goes through and it pulls in everything and converts it to a list. It kind of does the looping automatically, in a sense. Okay, let's jump back over to the tutorial. All right, so really what they're doing here, and the author's kind of doing the same thing that I'm doing in his own way, is he's giving you a breakdown of what each one of these controller methods does. All right, so each one of them, the index, of course, gives us that whole list up on the screen. Details pulls up particular albums and its information. And then we're also using this view bag thing to help pass information and use that drop down. And I think that that's kind of neat when you look at this and you do an edit and the drop down that comes here, that the view bag is the one pulling back those things and populating that drop down. That's a powerful thing as well. All right. Now we need to figure out what we're doing next for coding. Now, just to kind of leverage a little bit on that view bag thing, and I'm looking here at the bottom of page 63 how they do the drop-down list. They do want you to jump over to one of the view files, and in this case we would be looking at create. And that's the other thing that's built automatically here as well. When we do the scaffolding, it creates separate views for each of the CRUD operations automatically. All of those are customizable, but some of the stuff is automatically generated. The tool that he's focusing on, and I'm pointing out to you as well, is this one, the drop-down list, and how it is generated, really based upon the stuff, once again, that's inside our data structure. And then again, each one of the CRUD operations has its own view. Each one. Could you use standard HTML in place of many of these things? You could. But in this case, why would you when the engine is generating it for you? All right. Next thing the author is pointing out says there's two action methods associated with each form. All right, so just take a look here. They're looking at create. Notice that we have this little directive here that says HTTP post. What does that mean? Right, we're sending stuff to the server. All right, and apparently this particular one does these four specific actions. It reads the form values, so whatever we type in. It checks to see if it fails any validation. If it does fail validation, it's probably going to throw an error of some sort. And if everything is okay, it'll save it. If it's not okay, it's going to give us an error message. Now, I don't know if you guys tried to make your application fail. Did anybody give that a shot? Yeah, so what if I don't put a title in? That's not one of the required fields, the name for the album? What band was that? Pearl Jam? Yep. Well, I guess I deleted their album title. Better go fix it. That's okay. We could have deleted this album. That'd be fine. Maybe a price would be required. Or maybe the price needs to be a number. Where is that validation being written? That's... Yeah, this is the question that you guys need to kind of start to realize is where is this stuff happening? So, if I were to do a challenge question for you, in fact, let's do that right now. I'm going to give you guys like 2 minutes. Figure out how the validation is happening. We did point this out in the previous video. when we were going through it. I just want to see if you guys remember. So quick pause, figure it out, and you let me know how the validation is happening. So as Shelley very eloquently pointed out, that the store manager views, and the first one I'm looking at here is create. Well, first of all, notice that at the top here, we have the validation summary. Okay, kind of like enables the whole thing to operate. Then for each one of these little form fields, notice that we have validation message for. And if you really actually look at all of these have validation. The key to it is, what kind of information does the data structure require? What does the model require? Can I put a number in? Well, I could put a number in a text field that doesn't care. Can I put text into a number field for price? We already saw that's not okay. And the other thing is, you noticing this part? Yeah, allows it to be empty or not. Did you guys make this choice? Did you guys write that in? Who did that? The scaffolding. Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
So then it just calls the scripts on the top in?
Yeah. Well, the scripts up here at the top are just standard validation scripts that are pre-written. We used to write code, JavaScript code, to check to see if a field is empty. And then HTML5 came out with their built-in validation too, which kind of helps to solve some of that. But this is generated dynamically, automatically, by the structure that we have. You didn't have to code it. It's important to have validation whenever you're working with data so that your data does not get corrupted. Simple as that. All right, back to the tutorial. Another concept here, model binding, and this is, I guess, kind of what I'm pointing out here, is that we are, attaching our application to our data. And it's important that those things are linked together. This approach is called binding. So if you ever hear that term. They go through and they talk about the validation a little bit more, how the saving happens, and they're just showing you which commands are saving. But notice with the saving that there's actually two steps. So you take one step to add the information, and then another step to save the changes. Okay? Two separate steps. Notice here that it says the entity framework generates the appropriate SQL commands to persist the value. Yes. Right. Well, you have to remember that it's instantiated on the fly in this case. So yes, it will persist even when the application is not being used. Okay. All right. The one part that we didn't test was doing the create. So let's see if it's still up and running. Let's try a create new, and invent something. Well, can I type in a new artist? Apparently not. All right, Ozzy, it's your new record. I don't have album art, but I'm going to leave that blank. And then you should be able to see, once we find him. Did my album create? Yeah, you know what? That's one thought. Oh, yeah, because I did it by category. See, what category did I? It's still not the same. Still not in there. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. We go back to Visual Studio, run the application. The server's not running. Um, Store Manager, create new. Should probably choose one so far down on the list. And I'll just do it like this. See, here he's under rock. And there it is. So what I had going on is I had shut the application down. See how it requires the server? That's proof that it works server side. Stop your server, the pages still run, but I'm not able to manipulate the data anymore. So that's actually a good demonstration of that, I think. No, well, you know, if you're talking about should there be some sort of error for the user, that's where you really have to kind of be a little bit careful about how you do your application design, because giving a user super verbose error messages, maybe like about what specific database table is failing, really, what does the user care? Hey, it's not working is all they care.
Something to know that your data is useless.
Right, it's not working is their clue.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So the next thing they do is they go through and they talk about the edit window, which we've already played with, and they talk about the mechanics of how it works. And I'll let you work that part out. So you can see we're really actually zooming through the pages here because everything is working. In addition, they go through the deletion phase. We've already done that. And the other thing, folks, whenever you're going to be working with an application like this, and you know the scaffolding takes a lot of stuff, a lot of busy work out of it for us. But it doesn't mean that you can't come in and adjust all the stuff that you're seeing here. For example, this, what we're seeing up on the screen, we had set up some basic CSS early on that was given to us. So the look and the feel of what we have here can be completely changed. You can put more stuff into it, put different stuff on the screen. That's all controllable. You notice that the delete by default does a confirmation. All right, once again, they go through and do the work for us. Next little thing that they're also showing us is that there's a little HTML helper. You guys have learned about helpers that help to truncate the text. So for example, we will have album entries that are a little too long to fit in the table, and then it turns to a ... There's actually a little snippet of code that was written and dropped in to help handle that. All right, so what they want us to look at is Views, Store Manager, Index. So let's go back on over. And that's not something we have in place. This is something we're going to add. So here's a spot where we can do that. It says open and add the following code directly after the model line. Notice the razor syntax that we are using a helper, and you just call it a helper. So right up here, after the model declaration, we are putting in a helper. We are in the Store Manager Index view. And I'm not liking the way that this is formatted, so you can see I'm formatting my own special way. Just so that it makes a little bit more sense to me. You might opt to do the same. But basically what we're doing is we're taking the name of the object, we're checking its length, and then given a specific amount of length that's available, we are going to be running this substring thing, and the text that will be replacing whatever is not able to show is the ... So it's dynamically doing this with a little bit of code. It's not the scaffolding didn't do this part for us. This is our logic stepping in. So really part of this is to show you that you can take whatever the scaffolding creates and then take it up a notch. So if we stop our application now, I would also recommend that you come up to the root of the project, right-click, and rebuild, just to make sure there's no errors before you try to launch. And everything seems to have succeeded. Then let's go ahead and relaunch the application. And we're going to add Store Manager to the URL. And now I'm looking at the album titles, and it looks like all of them, at least on my screen, fit. But if I come out of full screen, are we seeing things get truncated, or are we still? Oh, we're still missing some code, I think. Yeah, let's. Yeah, it is wrapping, isn't it? Right, but we didn't finish doing what we're doing. We didn't finish the code. All right. All right. To complete the code, we have to put in the truncate. All right, and this is one of those things where now I know why I have all these little highlights in here to make sure that these things are present. So let's just check the code. We do have that in place. What we don't have in place is the truncates down here. So let's go ahead and grab these. So any of these where we might consider truncating, in this case, artist name, we choose the number of characters. And this is under the loop here.
So did they take album artists from like the low price?
Yeah, well, earlier when we were working on the tutorial, I decided to comment it out and instead of delete it. That's why you have a difference. All right, and then we got truncate for title. And you can see you can set the number of characters at which point it will truncate. All right, so let's go ahead and re-execute the application. Now, I know we're talking, you know, like we're doing this and we're rerunning the application. I didn't do a rebuild, so I'm a little pensive, but you notice that it is indeed doing the truncating now. You see the little ... dots. And the thing that does get people is, okay, so you run the application and it instantiates the database on the fly. But you have to keep remembering that if this application is a website that keeps running, it doesn't stop, right? So the data persists by virtue of the fact that it's running. All right, so let's close all the tabs, back over, hit stop, and let's move on. All right, so we were able to truncate it a little bit. Now, how useful that is, you know, I'll leave that up to you. But the point is, they're showing you how that you can take one of these generated views and do your own thing with it. All right, the other thing here, and this is fascinating, it says we have a major issue with our create and edit forms. They're not doing any validation. Boy, I thought we were just validating. We were validating on the most simplistic level is what we were doing, okay? So what they're doing here is they're showing you all the different validation little triggers that we can put in, or annotations, and there's significantly more that you can do, but for us, we're going to just look at some real simple ones. Whether something has to be there, for example, the range of values, etc. Now, notice that you can control the error messages that come out. So you see where it says required error message equals. Which file is this that we're looking at? It's the album class. So let's jump over to the album class. I don't see any of that in here. Do you? So really what's happening is we are going to be adding some information here. All right, first thing, make sure that all your using statements match up. Component model, data annotations, and web MVC. You notice how those libraries that they're indicating aren't present, indicating that we need to make them present. So we're adding all three of these libraries. We need them to get stuff to work. Yes, in addition. We are next going to come down here to the namespace section. We'll start by grabbing the bind. That happens above the public class. And then your option here, of course, you can go like piece by piece, folks, and just drop in each line. For my money, it's so much easier just to copy and replace everything. Yeah, and provided you have an electronic version to work from, but since this tutorial is online, it's all there. You don't have to worry about it. So I am actually going to take all the stuff out of here and I'm going to paste over all of it. And you notice at the bottom, they still have a couple that are just standard gets and sets. And it's probably not a bad idea to add a little bit of spacing in there, just like what they're doing. Because that at least allows you to see and understand how the stuff is attributed to each other. So we have a combination of requireds. We're throwing in some constraints here, like what's the maximum string length, what's an acceptable range of values. So we're playing with all of those different types of validation settings. All right, so hopefully you guys got these changes put in place. So what we're going to do now is make sure everything is saved, and let's launch the application once again. And the directives in the tutorial are to run the application and go to Store Manager, Create. As long as you can get into the Store Manager, of course, you can go from there. Now, I'm not sure if I hit that correctly. I'm going to stop it and start it over again just to make sure it's running right. And we'll go to Store Manager. And if you want to go right to Create, you can just type it in. It'll invoke... Oh. Okay, let's figure out what's going on. All right. Let me get my application running. Oh, I know what the problem is. You guys want to know what the problem is? It's a database. I just made changes to my model, right? Whenever you make a change to your model, you got to clean and rebuild. Like I've been telling you guys, my preferred method is to clean and then build. I mean, rebuild technically does the same thing, but you can generate error messages. And it says success, and I'm hoping at this point that we're okay. But that is required because we are definitely changing the model of the data here. So that's required. It will fail. Hypothetically, we shouldn't have any problems at this point. So we're in create mode. There's our validation happening now. See that? And then, of course, oh, I forgot what I even called this. So, yeah, it was category pop, but what did I create? Oh, there it is. So there's my entry. All right, so if you've successfully been able to launch the application, go in and create stuff like I just did, and notice that the validation rules are in and like, for example, the price range that I just demonstrated, then you're doing okay. I had a couple people here in class that were having some issues when they launched the application, and they were getting some sort of database error indicating that it was kind of basically being used by a different process or something like that. Folks, the thing that you should just keep in your head is whenever you're messing with any of the stuff in the model folder, a clean and rebuild is necessary before you launch the application. If you have the application already open in the browser, it needs to be attached to the current version running, not a previous version. So in some cases, you might find yourself closing your browser and relaunching your browser. And the tip that I give people, like I'm using Chrome, and depending on how you run Chrome, typically Chrome will stay running in the background even if you close it. So if you're having, issues, one thing that you might want to do is come down here and actually exit from here, and it'll close not only the open windows of Chrome, but all the background processes as well. And stuff gets stuck in memory. The other thing that we did to help fix the problem was we actually restarted Visual Studio as well. But kind of in the order of things, clean and build if you mess with the model, reinitiate the application, and you work with the reinitiated version. If the browser's not cooperating, restart the browser. If that's not cooperating, restart Visual Studio. All those things might be required to make it work. So just because we did all the same things in our code, there's still a chance that you were stuck in some weird state of limbo somewhere that might not be cleared unless you follow those steps. So worst case scenario, You could even take it a step farther and just reboot the whole machine. That would be a little bit extreme. You really don't want to have to be stuck in those situations, but stuff does get stuck in limbo, right? So clean and build, completely close your browser, restart Visual Studio, and hopefully that takes care of it. All right, so you should go through the process of going through these screens here and trying the stuff that they're suggesting to make sure your application is behaving. Once you're confident that it is, you can move forward. The author here is talking about some concepts now, and I'm going to highlight a couple. It says server-side validation is very important from an application perspective because it says here users can circumvent client-side validation. How can they circumvent it? Turning off JavaScript, because most validation tends to be done with JavaScript. So if they turn off JavaScript in their browser, and some people do, that can break your validation. So server-side validation still is important. A lot of people are like, well, HTML5 validates, JavaScript validates, why do I have to do server-side? The truth is you should do it in multiple places just to make absolutely sure your database doesn't break and it doesn't crash things. So, all right. Keep going through, keep testing. We're now at the top of page 81. Before I proceed into this next section, I am going to stop this video. I'm going to start a fresh video, and I'm also going to make a safe copy of my application before I proceed any further. So we made it up through page 80, and this video ends here.